Hello, boys and girls. I'm going to talk to you today about my brand new YA slash middle grade reader novel, Spyder's Rebellion. Um, Now, or the subtitle is How to Overthrow Your Middle School, and I think probably what's most disturbing about this novel is that it could serve as a guide for overthrowing your middle school. Uh, In part, that's because it is based on my own experiences, more or less successfully overthrowing my junior high school way back in the 70s, as well as some, experiences and things I've seen with my kids. My daughter Emma, for example, and her animal rights protests at Carver in Towson. Um, and I say this, Alice Deal Junior High School in my day, although Michelle Obama just danced there with Beyonce, I believe, a couple months ago. So perhaps order has been restored. But in my day, it was quite the chaotic scene. For one thing, busing had just started in D.C., and we had, middle class white kids and ghetto black kids in a culture clash for the ages. So that was one element of chaos. But I and my friends sowed our own sort of chaos, quite a political chaos. And, I would say that, in sixth, seventh, eighth grade, I was in an intellectual awakening. Becoming incredibly excited by ideas. We were at the sort of the tail end of the peace movement, and maybe the tail end of the most intense period of the civil rights movement, among other things. And I was reading Karl Marx, and I was reading Emma Goldman, and I was becoming very excited by ideas. Now that's something. I mean, I've read hundreds of kids' books to kids, and that's something I've never really seen, is a character undergoing that kind of intellectual awakening. And, even though the main character of Spyder's Rebellion, that is Spyder, is a girl, and I've raised some girls, so maybe that could help me transform my experience to a little girl's body. She is undergoing this process, and I think that's one, thing I tried to show. And one thing that's happening with these kids, I hope not in an annoying, polemical way that gets in the way of the characterization or the plot unfolding, is an exchange of ideas and a really exciting intellectual debate. And that's something that I felt was lacking in the kids' fiction that I've read, which is a lot. But at Alice Deal Junior High School in the early 70s, I started an underground newspaper, the Alice Deal Free Press. I'm not sure how good it was. I still got a copy somewhere. I should have dug that up. But as soon as we started distributing it, it was, very predictably repressed, burned, actually, or so they told me. We put it in little piles around the school, and they seized it. So then the second issue was about how the first issue had been repressed, and it was about free speech and the free speech rights of children. I was kind of obsessional about children's rights at that time, and I kind of regarded my public school and public schools in general as similar to, let's say, Eastern Bloc dictatorships, and I think they are. I think they're profoundly repressive regimes, and essentially they should be overthrown, and they should be overthrown by the people that are in them. So Spyder does actually starts a newspaper at the Jefferson Free Press at her Jefferson Middle School, transferred out here to rural PA, and it's repressed and it's burned, and things ratchet up from there. At Deal, I ran for student council president while urging people not to vote at all. And my slogan was "No more bullshit." And as my mother frequently tells me, all you could see above the podium, I was quite a shrimpy kid, was my fist. You know, no more bullshit. And of course, my posters were torn down, etc. And you know, so I sort of like founded this little revolutionary group within Alice Deal, dedicated to making the school impossible to run. And we largely succeeded, I would say. You know, at one point there was a teacher strike. As I recall, they wanted ridiculous things like new textbooks and smaller class sizes, which were running up to around 40, as I recall. So all the students were brought into the auditorium because there were no teachers in the classrooms until they brought in a bunch of scabs a few days later. But I led a walkout of students from that auditorium to join the picket line of teachers. And, you know, as I went on in my little junior high career, I got more and more radical and more pointed in my actions. And I often broke into the school at night. And at one point, for example, I stink bombed the school using a solution that I got, I think, from Steal This Book. You know, and I think this Spyder's Rebellion could be something of a Steal This Book or an anarchist cookbook for little kids. Although I don't actually give things like formulas for stink bombs, but you know, as I recall, it was based on Drano and rotten eggs. And a friend of mine and I, we soaked that school thoroughly in that solution. And as I recall, they couldn't open it for a couple of days. And I went back on some pretext maybe 5 years later, and I still caught a whiff of that stench. And felt pretty proud of that. And I mean, actually, my actions at Deal got a little more extreme, maybe than even Spyder does. And there were sort of, you know, blackmail letters to the administration, threatening this and that, and demanding an end to compulsory attendance and grading, things which were not really going to happen at the local individual school level, but which were, to me, at that time at least, represented, you know, a profoundly oppressive regime. And by the time I left Alice Deal Junior High School, the entire administration resigned. And a whole different regime was in place by the time I left. And I had, you know, I feel like myself and some of my friends, we had our little role in actually overthrowing the junior high school. Now, you know, this is not an instruction manual, and I hope it works as fiction. I think it does. Like I say, it moves it to a rural context, and Spyder's Rebellion includes sort of for example, a character who's kind of a fundamentalist Christian, and Katie, and she also has a kind of awakening of social conscience, which I think is very frequent in kids in 6th, 7th, 8th grade. You know, now hers takes a kind of Christian form, you know, or a liberation theology kind of form. They're punks and animal rights activists, and you know, there are little baby romances, and we're dealing with Spyder's kind of weird parents and everybody's weird parents in one way or another. Spyder's weird parents are, you know, recovering hippies, I guess, or you know, so I feel like the fictional elements are there, and the characters are, I hope, plausible, and the events are fun and coherent, I believe. I hope. I've never really written a novel before, so it's my first stab at that. But it's also a story of intellectual awakening and revolutionary consciousness, I would say. And I think that makes it unusual in kids' fiction. Catch you later.